mean, the first thing I want to say is that I have not been doing this very long. As you can probably tell, I'm not like 50, 60. I'm not a seasoned veteran. Let's have a get. How many of you think I'm 30 or more? Right, I'm 24. Just spoiled it. There you go. I'm 24. And I actually went to my first ever property course, get this, on the 12th of Jan 2017. So that was the first time I even heard about property. At this stage, I didn't even know how to buy a house. Like, I knew roughly what a mortgage was, but I didn't know how to buy a house or anything. And like most people, I decided to get trained. So I spent a load of money teaching myself how on earth it is you do property, especially when you have no money. You know, I got into property with £200 when I started. I had £200 in the bank, and I thought, hey, people keep banging on about these no money down deals. You can buy houses with no money. This sounds great. Yeah, let's do it. But the kind of real reason I got into property, going way back, was when I was in college. And I remember sitting my A-levels and thinking, okay, what do I want to do? Where do I want to be? I thought, ooh, investment banking, private equity, hedge funds, that sounds quite fun. And it's still interesting. But I started going online, I was Googling, okay, what do you do? What's the hours like? What's the pay like? And I saw 80 to 100 hours a week. I've got to work that hard. I wasn't up for that. You know, I was 17 at the time. I wanted to chill out. I wanted to go to the pub. I didn't want to go spend 80 hours a week working. So yeah, I kind of decided to put that to one side. I left college. I didn't go to university or anything like that. I couldn't justify going with no end sort of goal and spending 50, 60, 70 grand getting into debt. It just didn't make much sense to me. Little did I know that was probably the best decision I ever made. Not going to university was genuinely really, really worthwhile for me. Following that, I had a couple of your standard dead-end jobs. I was working in retail, stacking shelves, all that kind of side of stuff. I did a bit in customer service on the phones. And it got to a point where I quit what I was doing because I had this glass ceiling rat race experience really, really early on. And people say to me quite regularly, you know, oh, it's awesome that you got in so young. Congrats, well done to you. And whilst I really appreciate that, I think what I really deserve credit for is when I had the experience of the rat race, I had it really early on and I made my move immediately. I didn't sit in it for 20, 30 years. So if you're just getting into property, you're thinking about getting into property, or it's been a while, you've only just got into property, and you're not my age, don't worry about it. I was just blessed that I came across it a little bit earlier than you did. But the key is when you see that opportunity, don't sit on it, move with it. So as I said, I had that rat race experience. I quit my job and I spent 3 months with a bit of money in the bank doing nothing, which on the face of it sounded great. I got a 3-month holiday, do what I want. You know, I got no overheads, I'm living at home. Things are great. Nah. I learned a lot about myself in those 3 months. I learned a huge amount about myself in those 3 months. I remember one day I was walking down the street and I saw a guy I hadn't seen for a couple of years. And I said, hey man, how you doing? What are you up to? And he's telling me how he's got a new job, he's found himself a partner, potentially looking to get married, got a car, he's buying a house. He was my age. And I was like, wow. And he goes, what are you doing? And I was like, I'm doing anything. And I had that moment then where a big, big dent to my ego took place. You know, and I was just like, man, what am I doing? I wouldn't say I was depressed, I think that's a bit unfair, but I was getting low and I was getting bored. And if there's one thing I learned about myself in this industry, it's the power of boredom. If you're not doing something and you're someone who's meant to be doing something, you know, that is literally the opposite. If you're an entrepreneur and you like making things happen, you like taking risks, you like achieving things, doing nothing, spending 2 weeks on a beach staring at the sea, oh, I couldn't think of anything worse. That is like torture for me, that's prison. I couldn't do it. And I learned that whilst on the face of it, having a holiday sounded great, I needed to be actively doing something. And one day my dad came home and said, hey, do you want to go to a networking event? And my genuine thought was, well, there's nothing happening at home, I might as well go. How bad can it really be? And I went down, there's a guy called Samuel Leeds, who many of you may have heard of, and he spoke about lease options, no money down deals, and how you could buy property using none of your own money and make it completely passive. That was an eye-opener for me. I didn't look back, I leapt into it straight then. I got a book, I went and did some courses. As I say, my first course was Jan 12, 2017. This was super, super exciting for me. Super exciting. I then did some more courses, and in September 2017, I quit my job for good. In this kind of period, I'd picked up a bit of work as an electrician. I was working as a sparky, doing some sort of live events, things like that, just odd jobs to kind of tie me over. And I went full on into property. I paid for the course on debt. I got loans from the bank, paid all that back now, thankfully. And as I say, on the 2nd of September, I quit my job. And I didn't have any sort of backup income. I didn't have savings in the bank. I just thought, hey, solid, let's make it work. And again, something else I've learned through this industry, I've learned so much about myself, and honestly, making money's cool, but relationships and education are just class. And I learned that if you put yourself in a no-win position, where you have absolutely no opportunity, you have to win, it's do or die, it's life or death, something happens to you and somehow you just make it work. Our good friend Ahmed mentioned that he went from 0 to hero and back to 0 again. He knew how to do it, and then he came back and was like, I got to start all over again. He had to make it work, and lo and behold, here he is developing 180 units in Bradford. Awesome site. Peter Jones went bankrupt twice. There's many, many stories of people, Donald Trump went bankrupt, like many, many stories of people who have gone all the way down and had to build it back up again. And they have, because they had the education, they had the knowledge, but they were in a position where they had to succeed. And for me, that is super exciting when the odds are stacked against you and you still pull it out the bag. So yeah, that was September 2017. Sold my first deal. Started out as a deal sourcer. I decided that was what it is I wanted to do. I didn't have any money. I couldn't really buy any houses. So I thought, hey, I can find deals for people. HMOs was my first strategy. And I can package them up and I can sell them to investors for a fee. And that went really well for a while. Made a bit of money. Made sort of like 4 or 5 grand in a couple of months. It was all right. It was doing all right. And then we got to Jan 2018. Now Jan there was a problem because it's just been Christmas. I've just bought presents. I've had a bit of fun. I'm now away on holiday. I'm skiing. And I realize I got a bill going out when I get back and I can't afford to pay it. As I say, I'm in a position where I have to win. So while I was away, as I say, I was skiing. I spent every morning working. I'd be on Rightmove, on Zoop, I'd be ringing up agents. And I knew that the investors I had, and I had about 10 at the time, again, this wasn't a rapid journey by any means, not at this stage anyway. I had about 10 investors that I knew that wanted rent to service accommodation. At the time, it was a buzzword. Back in 2018, I mean, I say it's been around for a lot longer than that, but 2017, 2018 is when the world really started cottoning on to the whole rent to SA strategy. Everyone started doing it. It was booming. Booming. Everywhere you looked on Facebook, it was there. I thought, I'll find a couple of these. How hard can it be? And while I was away, I got my dad to drive to Norwich and up to Bradford and all sorts of different areas to view sites for me, view apartments for me. And I made 10 grand that week while I was on holiday. I had a really good holiday. I really enjoyed that. Skiing was cool, but when I came back, I had this proper sort of penny drop moment. This works. You can make a real income out of this. I just made 10 grand in a week. I'm all about this. We move forwards, and we're on March 2018. And March was a hell of a month. As I said, at this point, I probably made like 5 grand in 2017. Jan made 10, sold a couple more deals. We get to March, and I spent about 6 weeks packaging up this portfolio in Cleethorpes in Grimsby, up in the northeast. Interesting little town. I was given this site, I was given these deals, and they're all tenanted, completely ready to go. In theory, it was this passive portfolio. I could buy it, and I could make cash flow. But I needed an investor who wanted to spend £2.4 million, or a deposit for that anyway, on 16 houses, a mix of guest houses, HMOs, buy-to-lets. And I thought, hey, we'll give it a go. What do I have to lose? I'll stick it out on the list. Along with that week, I also sent out a couple of other deals, a little small HMO and a buy refurb refinance, like a flip in Wolverhampton. They all sold. I was like 20 years old, I think, when this happened. I was 20. I banked 71 grand in a week. I was like, geez, that's what I was looking to make in investment banking, but it would have taken me 10 years to get there. I'm doing like 80 hours a week and having no social life. Blown away. Still to this day, it is one of those moments where I think back, I can remember exactly where I was at the time. I was out with my mate having lunch in Birmingham. I just got a text and he was like, I'll take it. I nearly fell over, honestly. Seeing that much money come through at that age, I'd never made that much money in my life. I'd never had more than like 2 grand in my bank, ever, really. So to see that much money come in, I was just like, this is pretty awesome. From there, I teamed up with a guy called Anthony Wilmot, started scaling that deal sourcing business. From then on, we started selling deals almost on a weekly basis. And that deal sourcing business, it still runs. We've got full-time staff. I've now got an MD, a guy called Kyle, who runs it all for me. Absolutely awesome. I'm going to talk a little bit about systemization later. But a deal sourcing business is a lot of effort, it's a lot of time. You don't need your money, but you do need knowledge. But the one thing that deal sourcing gives you that no other strategy really gives you when you're starting out is an understanding of every single part of the process. The client who bought this portfolio was based in Qatar. And I built my business on the back of what he wanted, building a business that could service busy investors that didn't have the time or the inclination to look for deals. And it never really made any sense to me as a deal sourcer. If you're going to sell deals to people who haven't got the time to find deals, why the hell would you assume they have the time to set it up? No investor's got that much time. They can't be bothered to deal with solicitors and brokers, collecting keys. Like a little 2-minute job that's a nightmare if you live in London and your house is up in Bradford. Like you'll drive 3 hours up the M1 just to collect some keys, then drive back again. Forget that. What about someone who's a 7-hour flight away from the country? You're dealing with international investors. A lot of you here are Polish, right? A lot of you are going to be looking for money back in Poland. You're going to have to build a system, a joint venture structure that allows them to invest from overseas. Not all of them are going to want to come here. It's the same is true with every country you work with, but even people down in London, or even people in the same city. You could be a Leeds investor buying a site in Leeds. You might still not have the time because you're busy to do it. So I built up a business that was worked around what people wanted, what people needed. And that was kind of how the deal sourcing business took off, but it required me to learn each of the different aspects of the deal, how to finance it, how to buy it, how to refurb it, how to tenant it, and then of course how to systemize it with management companies and solving all the little licensing problems, all those kind of little bits. HMOs are where I started. I've probably done 70, 80 HMOs now, really right across the country. Started off in Doncaster, and as you learn an area, I'd kind of go through all of the houses in that area. I'd run out of sites to look at, so I go, okay, let's look at another area. Look at Leeds, especially across the M62 corridor from coast to coast. We find a lot of deals in that area. For rentals, as we've heard a lot today, the yields up here are an awful lot better. You can hit double-digit yields pretty easily if you know what you're looking for. Some of my houses have got 22% yields, which is ludicrous, although admittedly, small HMOs, a little bit of a refurb, you can get quite creative with things. So yeah, residential was where it started for me. And after HMOs, as I said, I met this guy, Anthony, refurb expert. Anthony's brother was in construction. Anthony could probably build a house with his own hands from the ground up. He knows his stuff. He worked at Sainsbury's for a while, and he has an incredibly interesting story. He's not grey because he's old. He's grey because he's had a hard life. But he's a seriously experienced guy. He's a really, really top bloke. And his mission, his passion is all about building quality houses, providing quality properties. And part of this is the refurb side. So when I wanted to start doing flips and buy, refurb, refinance, because everybody wanted them, hey, I want to have a house with no money left in, let's do a few of those. Anthony was the guy I met, and Anthony's the guy who taught me how to do refurbs. And we found that we got on really, really well. We shared the same ethos about making money in business, about providing quality products and services to the people we work with, and indeed genuinely being good, decent human beings in the landlord space, because there's no shortage of slum landlords. Moving on from residential, May 2019, something popped up on Facebook of all places. And the thing that popped up was that. A grade 2 derelict, as you can see, castle, 1876. And we looked at that and we thought, hey, it's just a big refurb, right? It's a big buy, refurb, refinance. I mean, there's a lot more to it than that, and we knew that, but we didn't know how much more. So this was our first sort of introduction to development. We saw it. It took many, many months before we were able to get around to a viewing, and it kind of just sat in the background. In the meantime, we were up in Wigan. We were sat in McDonald's having a little meeting with one of our builders, chatting about how he could invest with us. And we looked out the window, and there was a pub. Huh, what's happening with that pub? It looks a bit empty. We went on to buy the pub. So we bought our pub, and our first development site was the pub, and it's in construction at the moment. It's up for sale, and that's the site I know, and I was referring to about the social housing, because they're the people making offers on that. They love little units where you can get little apartment blocks, things like that. The pub was a really cool one. It was a straightforward buy it, refurb it, refinance it, rent it like anyone else. But instead of doing each house individually, you buy a house for 50K, spend 20 grand on it, refinance it for 100 and stick a tenant in. Why not do all of that in one go and get 6 units out of it at the back end? It's a bit like an HMO. You've got 6 things that you rent out rather than one, so you get more cash flow, but instead of buy, refurb, refinance, you still got your money back out. There's a free house with mad cash flow, but with the same risks as a buy to let. So that was the big thing for me about conversions. Pubs now are a little bit more difficult. They changed the planning rules more recently because they want more pubs in the world, which is fair enough. But back then, you can get planning pretty easily for pubs, and you didn't need too much in the way of parking. It was a really, really nice site. So these are our first 2 developments. They're a hell of a statement. I really like that castle. It's a really, really cool thing. So that's over in Wales, of all places, literally in the middle of nowhere, next to Snowdonia. These windows are like 9 feet tall, just for context. It's actually a 4-story building, but it's only actually 2 physical floors, despite the height. Victorian built, you can see the brickwork inside here. The beautiful thing about the Victorians is they know how to build houses. You want to buy a house of your own, I highly recommend, where possible, buy a Victorian property. They over-engineered the crap out of those things. There's a reason they didn't need lintels above doorways, because of the way they built the stonework. They put arches above it to spread the load. And this building, despite the fact it's got no joists, no roof, no windows, no doors, it is literally dirt and gravel and grass on the floor and empty walls, is still standing, even 40, 50 years later, on the side of a hill with no structural support. That building should have fallen over. But because it's effectively double skin and about that thick, that stone fascia is a full-on stone wall. It's still standing. So Victorians know how to build their houses. So if you are looking at your properties and you want a way of mitigating maintenance of things in the future, Victorian properties are great for that. They're pretty good on insulation. They don't need damp courses, because the weight of the property physically stops the water coming in through the walls. You know, Victorians knew how to build their houses, and we take a lot of what we do in our construction side from what the Victorians do, because we want our houses to last, especially if we want to keep them for rental. You know, we want to keep these properties for hundreds of years. I don't want to fall over. So that was, as I say, May 2019, we started really getting into development. And during this, we realized we needed a third member to help us out. We needed someone who knew about planning. He knew about old buildings and heritage and conservation. Someone who knew about all the architectural work, the technical side of building a property out. Because it's not just a case of throwing a few bricks together and you're left there. And when we get into 2020, we kind of progressed with this. We carried on building the sourcing business, as I say, and just kind of progressing with everything. And it wasn't until Jan 2021, this year, that AWT was born. So AWT is myself, James Armstrong, my business partners, Anthony Wilmot and David Taylor, hence the AWT. And David's a really, really cool guy. He's a structural engineer, and believe me, he knows everything. He is literally a walking encyclopedia. He's worked on everything. He's doing the refurb on Paddy McGuinness's house, right? Last year, the Blackpool Pier had a fire. He's the one that was called in to do all the structural calcs. He's worked on sites up to 50, 60 million. He's worked on football stadiums, houses, you know, shops, offices. He's worked on everything. As a consultant, as someone who gets paid hourly for trading their time for money. And when we brought him down to the castle, he was like, how the hell are you guys doing this with like 2-3 years experience, like no money? Like, how on earth did you plan on developing a site like this? And he kind of knew how to do a development, but he was like, how are you doing it? You know, how are you getting into all of this? And we explained to him the whole idea behind joint ventures and about entrepreneurship and the way you can change the way your business is run so you're no longer trading your time for money. And you could just see this light bulb go off in his eyes. You know, David is an incredibly intelligent guy, incredibly hardworking guy, incredibly knowledgeable guy, but he was stuck in the game. You need to get out. And since then, David's become a full-fledged entrepreneur. He's got his own development sites. Most of the ones that we're doing are with David. He's got like one separate one he had on from before then. He was trying to make that switch. He started buying his own HMOs and doing his own buy refurbs, you know, and he's starting to leverage those relationships he has with his clients, realizing that actually he doesn't just have to be their consultant anymore. And no matter what you're doing with this is especially true for people who are in contracting with builders. You know, you don't have to be a contractor for somebody else and get paid your 5 or 10% overheads and profits. Like, you can joint venture with a developer and make an awful lot more than that. Build it at cost with them and take half the profit. Make their life easier, help them with their financing. Or maybe joint venture with someone and don't be the lead contractor yourself, but be the person who runs the build because you know how to do all of that. It could save you money on management as well. So always think about how you can stop trading your time for money and how you can actually become a business partner in a development or in any sort of venture that you're doing, because that's where you'll find there's more money. That's where you can start making an awful lot, and you can earn when you're not working, which is the beautiful thing about business. You can make it passive. The whole point about passive is you don't have to work and you still get paid. You could die and still get paid. That's passive income for you. So yeah, that's a little brief story about me and how I got to where I am, but it's been a truly ludicrous year, 2021 has, to move into it with technically no sites active and to be now with 9 different sites, just over 60 million quid's worth of property across the country. So yeah, that's why I'm here today. Thank you very much. Thank you.